Being There may be one of the most quietly ACIM-like films ever made. Through the lens of A Course in Miracles, it becomes a meditation on innocence, projection, identity, emptiness, perception, and the strange power of not being fully trapped inside conceptual thinking. Chance, played by Peter Sellers, is an almost paradoxical figure. He appears simple, passive, childlike, and intellectually limited, yet everyone around him projects enormous depth, wisdom, and meaning onto him. That is profoundly ACM. The Course repeatedly says, projection makes perception. People do not see Chance as he is. They see their own interpretations reflected back at them. Politicians think he's a strategist, businessmen think he's an economist, social elites think he's a sage, but Chance mostly talks about gardening, and somehow the gardening metaphors become true anyway. This is where the film becomes spiritually fascinating. Chance does not aggressively assert identity. He has almost no psychological self-concept in the ordinary egoic sense. He isn't trying to appear intelligent, spiritual, important, wounded, superior, or special. The ego usually functions through constant self-definition. This is who I am. This is what I know. This is my status. Chance barely does that at all. So the world rushes in to define him. ACIM would say the egoic world is deeply interpretive. It cannot tolerate emptiness or openness for long. It compulsively fills space with meaning-making. Chance becomes like a mirror, and mirrors are unsettling because people encounter themselves there. There's also a profound ACIM parallel around innocence. Chance's innocence is ambiguous. Is he wise, simple, awake, unformed, or merely unaware? The film never fully answers that ambiguity matters because ACIM's innocence is not naivete or intellectual deficiency. It is freedom from the ego's constant attack structure. Chance doesn't seem psychologically defended. He doesn't manipulate much. He doesn't attack. He doesn't argue ideology. He doesn't protect a self-image. And because of that, he moves through elite systems with surprising ease. Not because he dominates them, but because he doesn't fully participate in their fear games. That's very ACIM-like. The ego's world runs on competition, performance, anxiety, and symbolic status management. Chance unknowingly sidesteps much of it. Then there's television. Television is central to the film because it shaped Chance's entire perception of reality. He learned about the world through mediated images rather than direct embodied experience. ACM would find this symbolically important. The ego's world is also heavily image-based. Screens, symbols, roles, appearances, narratives. People relate to representations rather than direct presence. Chance himself often seems unable to distinguish between mediated reality and immediate reality. That can be read two ways, as limitation or as revealing that everyone else is also trapped in symbolic perception, just in a more socially sophisticated form. The powerful people in the film are arguably just as conditioned as Chance, perhaps more so. They mistake appearance for substance constantly. ACIM repeatedly emphasizes you do not see reality directly while filtered through ego interpretation. And the gardening metaphors themselves are deeply ACM compatible. In the garden, growth has its seasons. Simple observations about nature become profound because truth often is simple before the ego complicates it. ACM frequently cuts through intellectual complexity with startlingly direct insights. Nothing real can be threatened. I am never upset for the reason I think. The present is the only time there is. The ego wants sophistication. Truth often feels almost embarrassingly simple. There's also a cautionary ACIM theme here. People romanticize Chance because he appears peaceful, but peace and dissociation are not identical. One possible reading of the film is that Chance is spiritually pure. Another is that he is psychologically vacant. The film intentionally leaves that tension unresolved. That's useful because spirituality sometimes glorifies emptiness without discernment. A person can appear detached simply because they are underdeveloped, avoidant, or disconnected. ACIM's peace is not numbness, it's awake presence without attack. Chance sits right on the edge of that ambiguity. And then there's the ending. Chance walking on water, one of the most symbolic endings in cinema. From an ACM perspective, it can represent transcending the ordinary laws of ego perception. Not literally becoming supernatural, but moving beyond the mind's assumption that material appearances define reality absolutely. Everyone else sinks psychologically into complexity, politics, ambition, and interpretation. Chance remains strangely untouched. Yet the film does not present him as triumphant, more like transparent, and perhaps that is the deepest ACIM resonance in being there. The ego spends enormous effort constructing a self. Chance barely has one, so the world cannot quite grasp him because the world mostly knows how to relate to masks.